1 Samuel chapter 6, verses 7 through 12. This is what it says. Now therefore, make a new cart. Take 2 milk cows, which have never been yoked, and hitch the cows to the cart, and take the calves home, away from them. Then take the ark of the Lord and set it on the cart, and put the articles of gold which you are returning to him as a trespass offering in a chest by its side. Then send it away and let it go. And watch if it goes up the road to its own territory, to Beth Shemesh. Then he has done us this great evil. But if not, then we will know that it is not his hand that struck us. It happened to us by chance. Then the men did so. They took 2 milk cows and hitched them to the cart and shut up their calves at home. And they set the ark of the Lord on the cart and the chest with the gold rats and the images of their tumors. Then the cows headed straight for the road to Beth Shemesh and went along the highway, lowing as they went, and did not turn to the right hand or to the left. And the lords of the Philistine went after them to the border of Beth Shemesh. And so before we get into it, does anybody have any observations about what we talked about today? Or the scriptures that we read right now? Kylie?
They said it wasn't his hand that struck us, but it happened by chance.
Yeah, they said that. They said possibly if this is what happens, then it might be by chance rather than God's hand. Good observation. Someone else? Bree? They did a long process to get it to where it is. Yeah. And let me get like 1 or 2 more, and then we'll get into the message. Ashley.
They were trying to get like their cart and the Ark of the Covenant to Beth Shemesh.
Yeah, they were trying to get it back to Beth Shemesh. Yeah, cool. Let's get one more observation. Who's got an idea? Okay, we will move along for time's sake, but we're going to start in verse 7. We see that in verse 7 it says, Now therefore make a cart, take 2 milk cows which have never been yoked, and hitch the cows to the cart, and take their calves home away from them. We see that the Philistines, in their plans of how to get the Ark of the Covenant back to the children of Israel, their plan was to get 2 cows who had never been yoked, to take away their calves away from them, and then send them out to Beth Shemesh. For those who kind of like the geographical point of things, was that Beth Shemesh was the border between the country of Philistine and the country of Israel. So that's kind of like if you guys have ever known when you guys look at North Korea and South Korea, there's actually a line that separates the country. And so you guys can imagine something kind of like that. And so what we need to know is that they said, okay, let's take these cows that have never been yoked, we're going to take these calves away from them, and then we're going to send them on their way. What they were doing was that they were testing God. How were they testing God? Because what you guys have to know is that cows that have never been yoked before, that like something is put on them in order for them to pull something, if they've never been trained to do so, then they will not do it. And even more so, they would even bring resistance against the yoking that is given to them. If you guys kind of need a bit of a reference, and I want to say it's in the Gospels, what is it? God tells us and calls us for us to not be unequally yoked with another person. Because cows, when they worked in pairs, they needed to be able to pull at the same time. And so that's kind of your guys' idea of what it means to be yoked. Especially for like in the cow's perspective and kind of in our perspective a little bit, but we can talk about that more later. And then we see that for taking their calves away, their youngins, the cows, they would have only gone in one direction, and that was towards where their calves were. And so you have this cow that has never been, has never pulled anything before. And then you take their children away from them, and they're like, these are the things that we are going to send to Beth Shemesh in order for them to take the ark back. We see that alongside seeing God at work with the pulling of the cart, they paid attention to see if what was given to them was okay, or what they're giving to Yahweh is acceptable for appeasement. So we see that at the end of verse 12, we see that they actually stand at the border and they watch to make sure that the cow makes it all the way there before they could take a breath to kind of just be like, okay, whatever happened, we are okay now. And so then when we look into verses 8 and 9, it says this, "Then take the ark of the Lord and set it on the cart and put the articles of gold which you are returning to him as a trespass offering in a chest by its side, then send it away and let it go. And watch if it goes up the road in its own territory to Beth Shemesh, then he has done this great evil. But if not, then we shall know that it is not his that it's not his hand that struck us. It happened to us by chance." They set the ark on the cart with the trespass offering. They send it on its way and watch it to make sure it goes where it needs to. And the purpose of this is because if the cows came back, then they would know for a fact that the things that they had suffered through, the tumors and all that stuff, it just was by mere coincidence that it was just at the same time that the Ark of the Covenant was there, that the tumors were there, and that would give them a point of rest in knowing that it wasn't God who did this, it was just an idea of chance. The idea that it was a coincidence that they caught these tumors when the Ark of the Covenant was within Ashdod. Now here's the thing. The purpose that they are doing all these things, because they're doing a lot to make sure that these things, make their way back to Ashdod. Right? Or no, my bad, to Beth Shemesh. They're doing all these things. Take these cows that have never been yoked. Take their children away. And then we'll see what happens. We put the cart and we put the ark on the cart, all these things. They do all of this stuff because they really wanted to see if God was who he says he is. If they send the ark back to the Israelites normally, then it would have been an admission that the God of Israel was more powerful than the gods of Philistia. And so to simply walk this ark back to them, and to give it back to them, was something that would go against their code, and they wouldn't be okay with that, or it would be against their pride, or their beliefs, or whatever you want to call it. We see alongside that reason why they do everything is because this is their way of showing the Urim or the Thummim. Now, if you guys remember, maybe about 2 or 3 months ago, we had talked about the Urim and the Thummim. And what it was that these, at least within the children of Israel, they would have these priests and they would have like a robe of some kind and they would have a black ball and a white ball in their pockets. And so if they had any yes or no based questions, they would go to the priests and they would seek them and be like, hey, like what does God think about this? And the Urim and the Thummim were kind of there to help be like guide God's hand because, they're not memorizing where they put the ball in the pocket. And so they're like, I'm going to grab this one. And if it's a black ball, then it's no. If they pull out the white ball, and then it's yes. But the thing is that that's how they determined, that's kind of how they had their connection with like, God, we need a sign from you. Is it yes or is it no? And so in that same concept, when these people, when they hooked up these cows to this cart, they sent it out, that was their own Urim and Thummim thing. That it was basically, if that thing comes back, then we know that this God guy is a big hoax. But if it did happen, then we know that he's real without necessarily saying forthright that God is real and these things are happening to us because of him. Here's the thing. There was no real hope in wishing that Yahweh was real. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Their hope lied in the fact that God wasn't real, and they were hoping that they were just struck with really bad coincidences. And the reason they wished it was coincidence was because if it was by coincidence, then they had the ability to live life the way that they saw fit. Because if God was really there, then that brings a real question to what they think and what they believe and their lifestyle. And so they hope it was chance. Because if it's chance, then that gives me the ability to live the way I want to rather than what a creator has set me to. Even in our society today, what you guys have to know is that we see that there are those who want to leave things up to chance. We see that even within the scientific realm, that in the origin of our creation, we know that in Genesis 1:1, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." But people who do not believe in Christ, they do not want to leave it to some God that created us, but rather would take the concept of that nothing created us. We're talking about the Big Bang. People believe that 4.6 billion years ago, nothing collided with nothing and exploded and created something. Created gas, and through the gases, that's how the planets were made and the stars were made. Single-cell organisms came into life somehow. And through those single-cell organisms, they decided to start evolving. 1 turned into 2, 2 turned into 4, 4 into 8, 8 to 16, and so on and so forth. And somehow that created the fish that existed in the water. And then at some point, it created the fish that grew legs, that grew onto land. And then somehow that turned into the different animals of the world, whether they're elephants or dogs, monkeys, or maybe at a certain point, humanity. But all of this happened because of some explosion that happened 4.6 years ago that realistically, we don't know where it came from. There was nothing, there was nothing, there was nothing, and then there was something. The idea of the Big Bang is riddled with things that are left up to chance, starting with the creation of the universe. It was by chance that the Big Bang occurred. There's no way to recreate what some scientists explain occurred. It's not recreatable because we don't know what created it. It just happened. When we look at evolution and how somehow by chance and organisms were able to evolve in massive ways, we grew up, realistically, there are, maybe 10 years between me and you guys, some of you guys. But how much of a difference 10 years will make? 10 years ago, when me and Mundo were in high school, the big thing that we had to debate with was whether or not we came from monkeys. And all these things would happen. You guys have seen that thing where it's like kind of like a 4-legged creature or whatever, and then it slowly evolves into a man, but the thing before it is a chimp, and they have like a black figure with a question mark on it, the missing link that they called it. And so scientists, they believe in the theory of evolution that we came from monkeys, that we weren't created. They back up their scientific ideas because 98.8% of our genetics is the same as monkeys. So what separates us really, that 1.2%? Aren't we all just evolved creation? Isn't it you just give the world enough time and the next thing will be created? Realistically, do you guys know that children who grow up with smartphones, I forget what it is, whether it's something in their eyes or it's something with their noses, it's beginning to actually evolve into where we are being okay with dealing more screen time than ever. Statistically, we talked about it before, there are students out here that they have 1/3 of their day is wrapped up on a screen. If you've ever seen your screen time and it's 8 hours, then you have spent 1/3 of your day on your cell phone. And now we are scientifically evolving into being able to endure more screen time. And so scientists figure that if these things are happening, and what's it called? Cell phones have only been around for 10, 15 years. What would happen if we give it 4.6 billion? Wouldn't it make sense then that, one day you had monkey, and you had monkey with 5 fingers, and then you had monkey with no hair, and then monkey with some hair? They knew how to throw tools. And here's the thing. We're going down one completely different rabbit hole. But here's the thing. All of that stuff is left up to chance. Realistically, if I was to grab a door, if I was to grab this microphone right here, and I was to take it apart, right, all its components, and I left it on a table, and I said, don't worry, guys, just give it 1,000,000 years, and that thing will put itself together. And we leave, and we come back 1,000,000 years. Will it be assembled? Realistically, no. If there's no one here to put it together, then it won't be assembled. I'm like, guys, don't worry about it. Just give it another 1,000,000 years. Nobody touches it. What's it called? Civilizations literally rise and fall, and we come back to this microphone. Is it put together? No. Why? Because there was no one here to put it together. Now, we started talking about this whole idea about how humanity is evolving to be able to deal with more screen time, and that causes our noses or whatever to kind of form in so that way it's better for endured screen time. And here's the thing. There's a huge difference between what is known as macroevolution and microevolution. What you guys have to know is that when it comes to microevolution, have you guys ever seen the picture of the birds in the Galapagos Islands? 4 birds with 4 different beaks? That is what we call microevolution. It's the survival of the fittest. The giraffe with the tallest neck gets all the fruits, and the one with the shorter neck dies. And in that same fashion, that's how microevolution works. And so what you guys have to know is that as you guys are dealing with people, which I don't know if there's a lot of them around still, but as these people, they believe in the idea of evolution, they will try to use the proved ideas of microevolution to be able to get you to think that macroevolution is a real thought. Macroevolution being the huge step between monkeys and humanity, still trying to find that missing link that they've been looking for over 100 years now, probably 100 years. The creator of the theory of evolution, his name is Charles Darwin. Everybody also knows him as the Darwin Awards, that when people do something that isn't too bright, and we call it basically, oh, that's just natural selection taking its course. But here's the thing, even the creator of the theory of evolution said that unless we find the missing link, then the theory of evolution will always be just a theory to me. And so here's the thing that we have to realize, is that humanity, the reason that we try to explain things away, like the Big Bang, right, is because humanity wants to be so rooted in its own beliefs that they would rather live their entire existence believing we came from nothing than having a creator that created us. As we tied the concept together, right, we talked about earlier with the idea of chance, the idea of cards. If you want the ace of spades, it's a 1 in 52 chance of it getting it. But here's the thing, humanity wants to leave these things up to chance. Why? Because they don't want to change their lifestyle. When we look at Christianity and we know that our relationship with God, we acknowledge the idea that we have a creator, and it influences our abilities as such, or it influences our idea of what it means to live under a creator rather than living under what we believe to be right. Which brings the second half of our 10 years in, right? 10 years ago, me and Mundo were battling the concept of us evolving from monkeys. And now you guys are dealing with a completely different concept, the idea of objective versus subjective truth. What does that mean? The idea of subjective truth being that I believe what I believe is to be right. And if you don't believe me, or you don't agree with what I believe in, then you are insert list of terrible names here. Right? One of the biggest ones we could see today is still, even as we look at the, the presidency, right? We see that one of the, what are they called? Trump signed 200. One of the executive orders, one of these 202,000 executive orders is the admission that there is only 2 genders within the system. Right? We know that it is only to be male and female, but you have all these people creating all these different types of genders, saying that it's on a spectrum, that it's the concept of that my pronouns aren't he, him, or she, her, but rather they, them, or fox self, or fox-like self, or something like that. That's a real gender, mind you, or a real made-up gender they came up with. It's not the idea that I am a man who is attracted to women, but rather I have this title here, or that I have this title here. And so where we came from, the battle of everything that was based, in fact, you guys are fighting the battle that is based in what I believe to be right. And why do we try to explore these topics? Why did humanity try to push out these ideas of there are more than 2 genders? Don't you know that? I'm allowed to love whoever I want. It's because they want to leave the idea of everything to chance. They want to leave the idea that the reality of me being wrong is even less probable than a 1 in 52 chance. We see that the purpose of people trying to leave things up to chance is because on the day that they acknowledge that we do have a God that watches over us, that has established law, has established rules that we live by, then that would have to constitute them to change. If we are created and he is our creator, then we would have to listen to him and accept the laws that have been given to us. The thing is that humanity is too prideful to accept that. So they would rather leave these things to apparent nothingness than to acknowledge the idea of a creator. We see that in Psalms 14, 1 through 3, it says, "The fool has said in his heart that there is no God. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven upon the children of men to see if there are any who understand, who seek God. They have all turned aside, and they have together become corrupt. There is none who does good, no, not one." We see that Jeremiah 17:9 says that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? And realistically, there is a portion of our lives that we have to deal with our hearts. We believe that there's one road that we want to go down because that's what my heart is calling me to do, right? Everybody says, what's the biggest piece of advice I could give you? And people are like, follow your heart. Follow your heart. Wherever your heart goes, that's where you should go with it. But the realistic matter of things is that we should be following God, and God will direct our steps. Here's the point in all of this. Because we already have a relationship with God, or I believe all of us have a relationship with God, we have the comfort in knowing that everything that does happen happens for a reason, and it's not chance. And it gives us the ability to put our trust in God, knowing that God is going to utilize it for something amazing, even if we do not see it yet. Psalms 37, 4 through 7 says this, "Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. Commit your ways to the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. He shall bring forth your righteousness as the light and your justice as the noonday. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in his ways, because of the man who brings wicked schemes to pass." We then see that in verses 10 through 12, it's the execution of the plan. That it's no longer, hopefully these things will occur, but this is the plan that we're going to do, and we're going to hope that this is what happens, that we get the end game that we want, or the result that we want. Verses 10 through 12, it says this. It says, "Then the men did so. They took 2 milk cows and hitched them to the cart and shut up their calves at home. And they set the ark of the Lord on the cart and the chest with gold rats and the images of their tumors. Then the cows headed straight for the road to Beth Shemesh and went along the highway, lowing as they went, and did not turn aside to the right hand or the left. And the lords of the Philistines went after them to the border of Beth Shemesh." We see that the cows headed straight for the road to Beth Shemesh and they didn't look to the right or the left. We see that everything that was acknowledged before, we see that the cows have never been yoked. Their calves were taken away from them. And as mentioned earlier, realistically, they wouldn't have moved for a multitude of reasons, but yet they did. So here's what we need to go. God has the ability to do the impossible, and on top of that, God does not leave things to chance. What we have to realize is that when we stand here on planet Earth, Efren, real quick, could you look up how quickly the Earth moves, how quickly the Earth rotates? So you have to realize that even as we're standing, that even as we are sitting, you have to realize that the Earth is moving and we are on it. We see that as it continues to move around, the idea of the sun, what is it?
So it rotates once every 24 hours like a day, but it's rotating at 1,000 miles an hour.
So you guys have to realize about that. Do you guys know that if you guys go anywhere, mind you, if you guys drive over 100 miles an hour, the police will immediately arrest you for speeding because it's negligence. Because what happens if you hit another vehicle going 100 miles an hour? That's borderline instant death if not put in the ICU for critical condition. But yet even that, the Earth is moving 10 times that speed, but yet we don't feel it. Right now, even when we think about it for just a second, we are moving 1,000 miles an hour, right? And the whole thing is that the scary thing isn't so much that we're moving 1,000 miles an hour, but what happens in the moment that it's spinning, that somebody puts their finger on it like we would a basketball and just stops it. Do you guys realize that the moment if somebody was to stop the Earth with just their finger and we came to a breaching halt, we would all turn into human projectiles comparable to that of bullets? Flying straight through walls, steel beams, whatever. Whatever it is, if we go this way, we're all going towards the wall and hitting who's over there. If we go over there, we're flying towards vans and concrete walls and metal. We're moving all this time, but yet we see that God holds the world in his hands. Realistically, as we sit or as we stand, we only take up 1 square foot of the world as a whole. If it's 8 billion people on the world on it, people say that we have an overpopulation issue. Some people say that we don't have enough people. Some say that we have too much food. Some say that we waste it. But realistically, if you got every person in the 8 billion around the world to be able to stand in the United States, we'd only fit about half of the United States standing shoulder to shoulder, top to bottom. God has his hand over it all. Thinking about the earth, thinking about the idea of as we take a step outside of it into the solar system, do you guys know that planet Earth, that it is exactly where it needs to be in regards to the sun? If you move that thing 1 inch closer, we would all burn from the heat of the sun. And if we moved it 1 inch away, we would all freeze instantly because of how cold the world would be. We have to realize that the God that we worship and the God that we serve has it all under control. You know, we all hear the horror disaster movies about the asteroid that's going to hit the earth, and then we miss it somehow. Armageddon, the person sets off the bomb, and then I missed the second half of it, but I know he died. All right? The thing is that as we've lived Earth, millions upon millions, or no, not millions, what's it called? In the idea of creation, we've probably been on the earth for about 6,000 years now. But even then, realistically, we have come close to the end of the world as we've known it several times, and we didn't even know it occurred. 100 years ago, an asteroid could have hit the Earth. It would have basically knocked out a good chunk of the right side of the state, so it would have started in New York, or it would have started a little bit lower than that, somewhere above Florida. And the explosion would have killed millions of people. It would have completely messed with the entire geological state of the world as we know it, but yet God had his hand over all of it. Why? Because when the asteroid passed by where the Earth was there 3 hours ago. And so when the Earth came down here, the asteroid was up here. And realistically, we were missing it on on a galactic scale of borderline inches. But God oversaw it all. Why? Because he has the ability to oversee everything. There is no such thing as chance with God. God doesn't be like, let's see what happens, but rather he watches us and he knows wherever he has us is best for us. And this is one of my favorite stories I like to tell people. It's the story of the farmer and his son. There was a farmer and his son, and they're on their farm doing whatever, and they have one horse. And the horse one day decides to get up and leave. It runs away, and now they have no horses. And the neighbor comes over to the farmer, and he says, terribly bad luck, isn't it? Your one horse decided to run away. That's terrible. And the farmer says, what do I know about these things? A few days come to pass, and the horse comes back with 20 wild horses with it, following its path. They're a giant group now. And the neighbor comes over and says, wow, look at that. It isn't actually bad luck. It was good luck. It took your horse running away in order to bring back 20 more, and now you have 21 horses. And the farmer says, what do I know about these things? A couple days later, the son, he's trying to put a horseshoe on one of the horses, and in instinct, the wild horse kicks its leg and snaps the bone in half. So then the farmer comes over afterwards. He says, wow, it wasn't good luck that you got 20 wild horses. It's bad luck because it broke your son's leg. And the farmer says, what do I know about these things? We see that 2 days later, a group of bandits come along, and they're looking for every able-bodied man, and they don't have a choice in whether or not they're going to go. And then they see that the son's leg is broken, and they said, we don't want you because you are more of a liability than a good thing for us. So then the neighbor comes over again, and he says, wow, look at that. It wasn't good luck, and it wasn't bad luck, and then we thought it was bad luck, but it's actually good luck, because who would have ever guessed, because your horse ran away and brought back 20 wild horses, and one of those horses broke your son's leg, that all of these events happened so that way he wouldn't get dragged into a life of bandits and a life of thievery. And the farmer simply said, what do I know about these things? What we need to realize is that even though we are handed good and bad situations at any point in our lives, God is in control of it all. We need to be willing to trust that if God has us going through this, that it will ultimately be used for good. And realistically, you guys have all lived through some events that you're like, how can God use this in my life? I feel like I got the theoretical short end of the stick. Why did this happen to me? Just wait and see what happens. Be willing to allow God to do these things. Because at some point you'll know why, and you'll be blessed all the more by it. Because God will use all things, even for evil, even the evil things that happen to you, He will use it for good. Proverbs 3:5-6 says this: "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your path." We have to know that it is rather remarkable miracle what has occurred. David Guzik, in explaining the cows that have moved out to Beth Shemesh, was an amazing miracle because 2 cows who have never pulled a cart before, either alone or together, no driver to lead them, yet they left home and marched the 10 miles or so to a city they had never been to. They left their own calves behind and went straight up on a certain road with never a wrong turn, never a stop, never turning into the fields to feed themselves, never turning back to feed their own calves. These are wild animals we're talking about. But yet they knew where they had to go, and they didn't stop. They didn't look to the left or the right, but rather they went exactly where they needed to be. And so we can draw away from this similar to how the cows moved and never stopped and until it reached its destination. So should we be in our lives. Now, am I saying that we're cows who have never been yoked or have young and stuff like that? No. But the idea is that as we move in the directions that God has called us to, may we never take the time to turn to the left or to the right, but to rather focus on the thing that God has called us to do. If you guys don't know what it is yet, then keep reading the Bible, keep being in prayer, continue to be within the church, and God will show you where you need to be. And once you find out what that is, make that your priority. So here's the conclusion. As we wrap things up, know that as we follow Christ, it means that we have comfort in knowing that everything that happens for a reason, knowing that we don't know what the future holds, but we know who holds the future. On the other side, as the people of the Philistines, they left everything up to chance in a hope that, God was either real or He really wasn't. We all know people who are similar to the Philistines, who are still in this area of questioning who God is or determining if that was actually from God. Let us take the time to keep them in our prayers, that they will be able to break away from leaving everything to chance and decide to follow God. I would encourage all of you to be the light to them and show them the love of Christ, knowing that the reason we follow Christ is not because we are called to follow rules and laws, but because of the love that Christ has given us is what encourages us to live these lives set apart from everyone else. There was a line that somebody once said this, that today we are going to go out into the market city and we're going to preach the gospel, and if necessary, we will use our words. Never forget that whether what you guys say or what you guys do, you guys will always be a light unto Christ. But the question is, how bright do you want to shine for Him? That's not a manipulation tactic, but a real question that we need to be aware of. Let's go ahead and pray. God, we're just so thankful for today, and we just want to lift this time up to you now, Lord. Just so blessed by the fact that our lives are not left to chance, Lord. Statistics of dice and cards and all of these different things, Lord. We process the numbers on everything, but yet we know that you are in control 100% of the time, Lord, because there's only one God, and it's you. We just want to lift this time up to you now. Just pray that the students have a blessed rest of their evening, Lord, and that they'll have a good Friday and a good weekend. We love you and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.